Thank you for listening to the Save Point Podcast. Please consider subscribing at youtube.com/SavePointVids. Follow us at Save Point Vids on all major social media platforms for up-to-the-minute updates on everything Save Point Vids related. If you find us entertaining and informative, please leave a thumbs up or a 5-star rating on your platform of choice. Your patronage is very much appreciated, and we could not do this without you. And now, on to the show. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Save Point Podcast, episode 13. I am your host, Josh Taylor. Today's episode is going to be all about Sony and their potential plans to acquire some new studios heading into the launch of the PS5. Before we get into that, though, I wanted to remind you that this is the Save Point Vids Podcast. I am here to bring you all of the news that you want to know about on a semi-regular basis. Still trying to figure out the schedule for that. But you can find us on youtube.com/SavePointVids and all of the major podcast platforms. So you're talking about Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Pocket Cast, and many, many others. Chances are, if you're watching it, or if you are listening to it on a podcast platform, chances are we are on there. So just search the Save Point Vids Podcast. We would definitely appreciate it. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, 5 stars, whatever it is that you happen to be using as your platform of choice. What I wanted to do, though, is kick off this this episode is actually read a story from IGN about Sony's basically considering, the headline is Sony is considering studio acquisitions ahead of PS5. So this is from Matt Purslow over at IGN. So please give him a click. But I'm going to read this verbatim. And then at the end, I'm going to kind of go into the studios that I think could be or should be acquired and the likelihood of that happening, and kind of talking about that, as well as the potential launch games or launch window games of the PS5 and what we expect to see. So again, this is from Matt Purslow, IGN. Sony is considering acquiring more development studios as it gears up for the launch of PS5. Talking to Nikkei, translation via Gamatsu, Sony Interactive Entertainment President and CEO Jim Ryan said that the, quote, content is more important than ever before, end quote. In order to secure more content, the company is considering the merger and acquisition of game developers. The thought comes to Sony as it observes new companies enter the industry, such as Google with its Stadia streaming platform. But while Sony no doubt needs to work ever harder to ensure it is competitive, the gaming giant welcomes new players in the space. Quote, companies new to the games industry looking at the market with hope is something we definitely welcome, said Ryan. Sony Interactive Entertainment has 25 years of experience in the games industry and has big assets, end quote. Should this become more than a consideration, it will see Sony acquire more developers for its first-party portfolio, meaning more studios working on PlayStation exclusive games. Exclusives have long been key to ensuring console success stories, and Sony has arguably seen this more than ever during this generation's lifespan with PS4 games such as God of War and Uncharted 4. It seems likely that Sony would want to secure more exclusives for the upcoming PS5. So again, anytime that a new console generation comes around, we always start to see stories like this. Microsoft last year and even this year, this year at their E3 conference, they said that they announced that they acquired Tim Schafer's Double Fine. And last year they had, I think, 9 studio announcements, whether that was internally created studios or just acquisitions. So it's not surprising that this story is coming out for Sony. It's kind of what comes and goes again with each generation cycle. But what I wanted to do is kind of, look into my crystal ball and see what 5 studios. So I have 5 studios listed, some that I think are very obvious, some that are not out of left field, but don't really have a shot of actually happening. but kind of going into that and, seeing what's possible, I guess, and what would make sense for Sony. What are they missing in their, what holes are they missing in their first party studios that these developers could potentially fill. The first one though is Supermassive Games. They are most famous for Until Dawn, which was not a PS4 launch game, but it was an early PS4 game. And, at the time it had, up until Detroit Become Human, it had out Quantic Dream in the sense that it was a very narrative focused, character driven kind of adventure game in the vein of a David Cage game, but, with Beyond Two Souls having come out, that was more or less a disappointment after the success of Heavy Rain that Quantic Dream had. For Supermassive to come in and kind of fill that gap, I think it showed huge upside to what this developer could do. And now that Quantic Dream, recently within the last couple months has said that they are going multi-platform, I think that this is a real big opportunity for Sony to, keep those narrative driven, character driven games exclusive, through at least one developer, exclusive to Sony's next console. I think this would be a huge get for them. I think it only makes sense. Until Dawn came out in 2015, so I know they're working on a compilation game for their next title. It's going to be like a series of short, quote unquote, short stories built into this overarching game, where each story, I believe, is thematically and maybe through thin threads that are they're somehow loosely connected to each other, but they each take place in a different time period with different characters and things like that. I think that could be really cool, and I would like to see them. Until Dawn, I think, is it was very highly rated, but I don't even think it was played nearly enough as it should have been for as great of a game as it was. I think that this is actually pretty likely. If I had to put a percentage on it, I'd say somewhere in the 50. It's like a toss-up, 50 to 65%. I think that this actually has a good deal, or a good chance of actually happening. I would love to see that. The next one, though, is Housemarque. So Housemarque is a smaller developer in that they don't really make the traditional AAA titles, but they do have a lot of great, highly regarded and highly critically acclaimed titles. Dead Nation, Matterfall is coming out, Alienation, Resogun. There are a couple others. I'm drawing a blank, but they have a great pedigree and they have a great, obviously, working relationship with Sony. I think that if you want, again, they're not known for the big AAA cinematic experiences like a lot of the other developers that I'm going to be talking about. However, if you want a developer that will, whether it's a twin stick shooter like a Dead Nation, or if it's a side-scrolling maybe action RPG or a side-scrolling Metroidvania type of game, and you want this developer, Housemarque, to release one every couple years, more of an arcadey type of experience, I don't think there's anybody better. Now, they have had some missteps here and there, but overall, I think the pedigree of this, this developer kind of speaks for itself. Resogun, if you haven't played it, it was a launch PS4 game. Still, in my opinion, one of the best just arcade chase a high score type of games that you'll find even to this day. Great game, great game, great developer. I'm super excited for it. I think that this, again, has a fairly good chance. I would put it right around Supermassive. I think it has a better chance of happening than not. That 50 to 60, 65% range. And again, if you're looking for a developer that kind of gives you that quote unquote indie experience without technically being an indie developer, I think that, there's not a whole ton of studios that are better equipped to give you that type of experience. The next one is a big one, and it is Kojima Productions. Now, this one I was hesitant to put on there, but kind of what solidified it for me is obviously, their game coming out in November, Death Stranding, is exclusive to Sony's consoles. And I said consoles because I do believe it'll be eventually cross-gen, PS4, and probably have a PS5 definitive edition, similar to what MGS5 had, where it was kind of cross platform or cross generation. Excuse me. I think that this is going to be the same type of deal. But this would be a huge get. I think this is such low hanging fruit. I mean, they've already obviously paid Kojima to stay with Sony for at least this game. If it's going to be the critical and commercial success that I think we all universally believe it will be, I don't see why they just won't buy it outright. I mean, that would make such a huge splash in the industry. I truly believe that, whether it's Death Stranding 2 or a brand new IP, whatever it might be, the fact that it's got Hideo Kojima's name on it, there are not many names in the industry that can stand toe to toe with him. The only one that really, I think, surpasses him is Miyamoto. But, he's up there. He's in the rarefied air of just kind of revered game developers. My point is that, having his name attached to whatever comes after Death Stranding, I think, will be, to a good percentage of gamers, it's going to be a system seller. And so why not, just invest in it now? He's obviously got carte blanche. Just give him the money and the resources to make the games that he wants to make. He's obviously very cinematic in his storytelling, very, a lot of very, what's the word I'm looking for? The themes of his games are very, not out there, but they're very philosophical in a way. He just likes playing in that space, and I think he does it better than just about anybody else. So I think it would obviously be a huge, and again, with Death Stranding coming out, I think it would be such an obvious get to pick up that studio and, bring him into the PlayStation family until, whenever, until, the end of time, till the end of PlayStation, but, keep him with PlayStation. And I think, again, whatever comes after Death Stranding is, it's a system seller. It just makes so much sense that I can't imagine it not happening. And I think this one, even though I think it would be the biggest splash is in terms of like the name attached to it, I think it actually is the most likely of them as well. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say 75% chance that this actually happens within the next 12 or 18 months. I wouldn't even be surprised if it happens this fall, whether it's right before, right after Death Stranding is released. The next one is Insomniac. Insomniac's name gets thrown around a lot with, I think anytime that these stories come up that Sony is going to buy a new studio or, acquire a new studio, Insomniac's name gets thrown out there because it's an easy get. It's an easy target. They've had a great relationship, with them going back to the PS2 and, the original Ratchet and Clank. Obviously their most recent game, the Spider-Man PS4, came out last fall to critical and commercial success. So obviously they have a great working relationship with Sony. Even though it makes so much sense for this to happen, I think Insomniac likes their independence. And if I remember correctly, I think that there were not public negotiations or public talks, but you have to imagine that Sony at one point or another tried to scoop Insomniac up. And I doubt that. I mean, obviously it didn't go through. It didn't happen. And it's probably just because Insomniac likes their independence. They're a big enough name. They are they're a AAA independent developer in the most literal sense. They're independent in the sense that, you know, they can, you know, they had Sunset Overdrive with Microsoft, and they had the Ratchet and Clank remake, and then, you know, the Spider-Man PS4 with, you know, Sony. They have the ability to kind of work with who they want and pick and choose depending on what they believe is best for their development studio. So even though, you know, they have had a great relationship for almost 20 years now, I don't actually see this happening at all. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say it's less than 10%, 15%, just because I feel like these negotiations or this acquisition has been coming up so often that I just don't see it going through unless they threw such an exorbitant amount of money towards them. I just don't see it happening. But the last one I had is one that a couple years ago I don't think would have been brought up in any discussion, but with the kind of, you know, 2.0 relaunch of this game, I think that it makes more sense now than ever. And I'm talking about Hello Games and No Man's Sky. This game had a troubled development. It had a very public, obviously, and troubled launch. This game, by all accounts, by most, if not everyone in the industry, was dead on arrival. It just did not live up to the promises that were made very publicly on E3, you know, stages and, you know, other industry events, that, you know, this game was going to be, you know, you go anywhere and do anything. You can explore every corner of the universe, and, you know, you and your friend can be in the same universe, but you'll never run into each other because it's so, you know, massive. And, you know, the multiplayer aspects of it, you know, there were just so many different features that were touted that when it launched, it didn't have half as many as that they had promised. And it would be very easy for, you know, Sean Murray over at Hello Games and his team to, you know, give up the ghost and, you know, kick it to the curb, put your head down. There were even talks that they would have to, like, change the studio name and try to rebrand because, you know, the reception was so awful, you know, and I don't obviously condone this by any means, but they were getting death threats and all kinds of just heinous shit that, you know, I mean, we're talking about video games, let's be honest, but, you know, people were upset, and understandably so, because they had paid $60 for a game that they expected to have all these features that were talked about and that was missing. And so they felt like they were cheated. Again, obviously don't condone death threats and, you know, personal attacks on developers and things like that, but I can understand the frustration from it. But instead of giving up, and instead of, you know, moving on to the next thing, or, you know, changing studios or shutting the studio down or whatever it is, they went radio silent. They got to work. They kept their heads down, and they basically just started rolling out, you know, it was months where we didn't hear anything. And it was just like, they really are. They're going to drop this game and just pretend like it never existed and sweep it under the rug. But slowly but surely, they started, you know, rolling out patches and updates. And then, you know, I can't remember the name of it, but it was No Man's Sky, the kind of, the relaunch of it, Beyond, No Man's Sky Beyond. And that was kind of like the 2.0 not rebranding, but relaunch of the game. And, you know, by all accounts now, they have the VR version coming out, if it's not already out, but it's so much closer to the original vision of the game than it obviously was at its original launch, that I think they've garnered, you know, a lot of goodwill. They've owned up and admitted to their mistake. You know, they showed it too early. They promised too much. You know, they let the hype get the best of them, and they kind of, you know, made their own bed for the longest time. But then they, you know, they dug themselves in a hole, but they were able to, you know, climb out of it and again, make this game what it was originally, closer to what it was originally promised to be. So with that being said, I think, you know, now kind of having gone through the tunnel and, you know, hindsight is 2020, I think it would be a smart move for Sony to scoop them up. Sony has, obviously it's on Xbox as well, so it's not, No Man's Sky is not a PlayStation exclusive, but it shows like, hey, this team knows what they're doing now. They'll learn from their mistakes, and they won't promise, they won't promise too much and not be able to deliver on it, and keep everybody's expectations in check. But I think it would be, if you're looking for No Man's Sky 2 or, that big, first party live service type of game, akin to not a shooter in the sense that, it's going to be like a Division or, why can't I think of the name? Sorry, it's late when I'm recording. Division or Destiny or anything like that. But if you want that type of open world, you literally go anywhere, do anything kind of, we're not going to hold your hand type of game. You kind of explore and you figure it out as you go, but it's a live service with, continual updates and new events and things like that. I think that could be a huge get for Sony, and they don't really, unless I'm forgetting a studio, they really don't have anything like that in their stable right now. They've got Naughty Dog, obviously they're very focused on third person action adventure, heavy narrative driven games. You've got Polyphony with Gran Turismo, you've got Media Molecule with Dreams. There are others I can't even think. Until Dawn just came out, and so if you see what I'm saying, they don't have that type of live service game. And I think with that seeming to be the trend in the last 18 months to 2 years, and it seems to be the trend going forward, it doesn't seem to be slowing down at all. I think that this could fill a really big gap in their portfolio, and kind of make Hello Games like a household name in the same way that Insomniac is, or that Naughty Dog is, or even again, Insomniac's not a first party studio, but you get my point, kind of that household name where you think about the top 10 or 15 developers, they're recognized, they are known, and again, I think that would be just a huge boon for that team, and I think that Sony would be wise to do that. But that's pretty much it, guys. Like I said, it was just top 5. Those were the 5 that instantly popped in my head. I don't know if that, like I said, I think some are more obvious than others. Kojima being, the number one, just because it seems to be such a, obviously we're not privy to the contract details of Death Stranding and, how much they had to pay to make it exclusive. But, I think that's a huge get. I think Hello Games makes a lot of sense. And, Housemarque and Supermassive again is a big one, just because, Quantic Dream is going multi-platform. And so if they want that type of game, that adventure, not action adventure, but that traditional adventure, again, narrative driven, choice driven, type of experience, Supermassive could fill that void that, Quantic Dream is going to leave behind as far as exclusives go. Housemarque, again, for that independent indie game feel, without obviously, again, like I said, technically being independent. And then Insomniac, again, that name keeps getting thrown around a lot every time these conversations come up. It's not going to happen, but it's, as long as, as long as Sony or Microsoft are going to be scooping up developers, that name is always going to get thrown out there, just because they've built that type of pedigree over the last couple decades. But I don't see it happening anytime soon. And then again, Hello Games. It would be awesome. So anyway, guys, that's all that I've got. Let me know what you guys think. Tweet at me at Save Point Vids or Save Point Josh. You can follow me there, and also on Instagram, the same names. If you haven't already, please like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to give it a thumbs down, I ask that you don't. and give it a thumbs up anyway, or don't give me any thumbs up or thumbs down. I would appreciate that as well, but do what's best for you. Obviously, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and then again, let me know what developers you'd like to see. Drop it in the comments. So I'm always open and willing to have a conversation with you guys. Let me know if you think I'm completely off base, or if you like the picks, or if you would switch out something. Again, always willing to have a conversation. Find this again, youtube.com/Save Point Vids and all major podcast platforms. And until next time, you guys stay safe.